Hey guys, I'm Freeman, and I want to welcome you to a new series we're doing called Bible Studies for Busy Believers. Now, this series actually started back when I was in college, and I took a class where I had to write an exegetical paper on a chapter of scripture that I'd always found really dry and boring. Well, as I began structurally breaking down the text and began reading what some of the rabbis wrote about it, what the ancients wrote about it, and the commentators, and began trying to kind of understand it within its cultural context, man, it came to life and just started singing to me. It did for me what I thought Bible study is always supposed to do, you know? So, the next 2 semesters in college, I ended up writing papers on other chapters in this same section of Scripture. So by the time I graduated, I felt like this stuff was just part of me, just alive with me, you know? I couldn't get enough of it. So what I did was I just started disappearing in whatever theology library I could find to try to get my hands on anything that had ever been written on these texts. Well, I'm excited to do this series because it is now 4 years later, and I'm still talking to my friends about it, I'm still teaching about it, I'm still trying to find a way to kind of pull this massive amount of information together in a way that can really be effectively taught. So I think this video series is going to be a great way to do it for a lot of reasons, really. One is there's so many charts and diagrams and so many ways that the text breaks out that I want to be able to kind of show you guys what's actually happening within it. And so I'm really excited about that, but also I think these are going to be a lot more palatable than an hour-long written study that you have to work your way through. I want to keep these about 5 to 10 minutes long, and at the end of them, I want to give you a thought that you can kind of meditate and ponder as you're going throughout your day. Sitting at stoplights or waiting to get your coffee, because our brains work on something called the first thought principle, like a default thought principle, where when we're not actively focused in one direction, our minds will always go back to whatever is considered the primary thought in our subconscious. And usually that's something that's very emotional, probably something that's probably negative. So what happens is when we're not focused, our brains will always go back to the same, always go back to it. And so we get into these negative loop patterns that are really hard to break for that reason. So we figure, if we give you a thought that's really meaty, that can really begin driving your attention in a new direction, we can break some of these patterns and begin kind of moving forward in life, right? But, like I said, I've never done a video series before. So it might be kind of random at first. It might take us a little bit to kind of find our voice and kind of find the rhythm of the series. So you're gonna have to stick with us, gonna have to bear with us a little bit. But I feel like once we catch our groove and once we catch our rhythm, this thing can turn into something that's really special. So let's go ahead and get started into the series. I want to start off by telling you guys kind of a strange story that I think will orient ourselves to begin moving into this series.
Imagine with me, what would happen if one day scientists discovered a meteorite that was going to shatter the Earth in 6 months. So a frantic search is made to find a new home for humanity. And on the far edge of our galaxy, they find one small planet. So a vessel is made, a vessel that will carry our children to this new world. Now, this world is so far away that they will leave as children, but by the time they arrive, they will be full-grown adults. And this small planet is like, but very much unlike our own, for it is full of diseases and beasts and disasters untold. It is estimated 95% of all the children born on this planet will die before the age of 18. They will call their world Nomos Sepulchrum, the home of graves. But the fate of humanity does not rest in their hands. That is a burden that has been laid on your shoulders, for you have been commissioned to send with them a record to sustain them. This record must include all of humanity's history, science, poetry, and culture. You must teach them how to emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically survive devastating trials. Your words must keep them healthy, united, must answer all of the great questions of life. You must give them the words to sustain them and inspire them to survive. But they will not have paper to pass down your words. So you must send this to them in a way that they can memorize and carry with them. You must write all of this in 11 pages. You must, for in the end, what you write them will prove to be the decisive factor that determines the fate of humanity.
Alright, so here it is. The reason I tell you this story is I want you to kind of start thinking about the massive complexity of trying to draw together all of the wisdom necessary to keep and sustain a people. And then to be able to do it in 11 pages, you can imagine how every word and every phrase would have to be so carefully chosen. Well, the reason I tell you this story is the world in this story was very much like our world was like 4,000 years ago, when people faced a 95% mortality rate. And there was story after story of one king or one elder or one leader making one wrong decision. And that one wrong decision resulted in the wiping out of an entire people. You see, you can imagine that say you were like a king and you only have one son who's going to take over the kingdom to try to sustain your people. But this one son of yours is an absolute idiot. And so you know that he does not have the discernment to be able to rise to the role that he's going to have to assume. What would you do? You would draw together all of the wise men of your people and all of the leaders and try to put together this document that would give him the answers that he alone wouldn't be able to come up with in these key situations. See, the reason I tell you this story is this document exists, and this document is what our study is going to be. You see, it's actually not 11 pages. What it is the first 11 chapters of Genesis. That is the design of those first chapters in the Bible. Now, the beauty of these texts is that they're not just what happened to one person at one time in history. What they are is the paradigms of how the world works. So whether you're living 4,000 years ago, today, or 4,000 years in the future, these are the paradigms that will help you see the world in a certain way, that will help you illuminate the right decision as you move through your life at each step. Because what's going to happen is, you're going to get to the end of your life and you'll look back at all the decisions you had to make and the impact they had. But you're going to be able to pick out 4 or 5 decisions that fundamentally shaped the entire course of your life. Now, I'm not talking about decisions of like, right and wrong, moral decisions of good and evil, that kind of stuff. No, what I'm talking about is decisions that, at the time, both of them on the surface look like good decisions. Like, say you're a female in college and spring formal's coming around, and there are 2 guys that have asked you to spring formal, and both of them, they're both attractive, they're both funny, they both look like they're going to be successful people, both asking you out. Which one do you go with? Now, it seems like a small decision, but let's say you go out with the first one, and you end up marrying him, and he becomes a U.S. Senator. And at the end of your life, you get to watch as one of your grandchildren becomes President of the United States. Or you marry the second one, and that ends up just spiraling into a really bad relationship, and you end up a divorced single mother of 2 children. You never remarry, and you end up at the end of your life very lonely. Those are the harsh realities of life. Or let's say you take a third choice. Let's say you don't go with any of them. You stay in your room and you study, and you get really focused on your schoolwork and being the best you can be. And so when you graduate, you're being recruited by both Google and Apple to go to work for them. Now, these are 2 great companies, but they're in different cities. And so whichever one you choose is going to send your life in completely different directions. So this is why we need something like this. Now, I understand though that the idea that something like this could hold all of the answers we need, or give us at least a lens to be able to illuminate what the right answer might be in these different decisions, it's totally audacious. It's totally, arrogant for any text to say it can do that, right? Well, what's going to happen is as we dig into Scripture, we really begin to study, what we're going to find is it's always audacious. It's always bold. It's always daring us to come in and try to, find flaws and find errors and find places where we think that what it's saying is BS. Because that's where it's going to have us. That's where it's going to blow our mind and get just totally interesting. You see, these texts were written out of just a deep love for their people, a deep love for the reader, for us. And what they want more than anything else is for us to live lives like these texts are. The reason they're so bold and audacious and daring is they're just egging us and pulling us in to say, hey, this is how we want you to live. There's only one way to live, and it's on the bleeding edge. We want you to live a life that is so bold and daring to the point that it almost seems audacious. Alright, so if these texts claim to hold like a way to see the world that will give us the answers to the greatest questions of life, and they're daring us to come in and challenge them, and they want us to live bold and daring lives, then let's do just that. The meditation I have for us today is this: with no limitations and no hesitations, let's ask ourselves, what are the greatest questions that we would want answered for our lives? What are the greatest questions of life, the information that we want to be armed with as we go forward? I want us to consider this stuff because it'll give us the lens on what to look for as we're reading through these texts. But I'm telling you, if this is true, it changes everything.